Hey, everybody, welcome to EduMatch. Thank you so much for joining us today at our very special time for a very special topic. We're going to be talking about concussions in education. So, speaking of EduMatch, as you know, you could be the featured person of the day. Just go to our website, edumatch.org, look for the sign up button on the top right hand side, click that, fill out the form, and we will get you all connected. So, some benefits include being added to our awesome table of EduMatchers. Check that out if you have not yet seen it. It's available on our website. In addition, we will feature you as person of the day within I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a little bit of a wait. However, we will tag you as matches come up. So definitely do that, as well as checking out we will also tweet out your blog as long as there is an RSS feed that we can find. So good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. So without any further ado, we're going to jump into our conversation on concussions. So we're going to go through introductions. We're going to go from my left to my right. So we're going to start off with David, then we're going to go to Jennifer, then we're going to go to Stephanie. So let's start first with David.
Hey everyone, my name is David Tran. I'm in sunny Southern California right now, and I am an administrator. I am also an athletic director and former PE teacher.
Awesome. So happy to have you here, David. So thank you so very much for joining us. All right, next up we have Jen.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jennifer Kestad. I'm a teacher librarian in Aurora, Canada at Cardinal Carter Catholic High School. Also the author of Social Media and a fellow EduMatcher. And I'm currently in the Tampa Bay airport. I got to spend time at FETC with awesome people. And then I got to spend some time with Fran Siracusa today in Clearwater. So excited to be here.
Awesome. And we're
possibly Wi-Fi.
Okay, absolutely. Well, we're super excited to have you, and thank you so much for finding the Wi-Fi to join us today. All right, and last but not least, going to hand it over to our amazing moderator, Stephanie.
Hey, EduMatch world, it's Stephanie Filardo. I am here in St. Louis, and I have a dog, so he might jump in. So that's Sailor. If the world gets to meet him, he likes popping in and being the center of attention. I teach computer science and web design at St. John Vianney High School here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I also am the author of a chapter in EduSnap 17. I almost said 16 there. I have one in there too. And it's called Post-Concussion, which is part of where that experience is where this chat comes from, this tweet and talk comes from today. And I thought it would be great for us to all get together and have a conversation about concussions. So I'm hoping that we can all share our experiences and learn a lot of great stuff as we go through today. So, Sarah, if we don't have anything else to add, we can go ahead and kick it into our next question. Okay. So, and I want to thank David and Jennifer and Sarah for joining us today. It's always great to have more than just me and Sarah talking to each other. So in your guys' introductions, we kind of said it, but maybe not really. So let's just go ahead and clarify, what's your experience, like what brings you to this panel today? What's your experience when it comes to concussions as far as, personally or working with students with them? So Jennifer, David, which one of you guys wants to pop in first? Or Sarah?
I can go first, since I got my mic off first, I guess. So being the AD, I have to train all of my coaches on concussion. They also have to go through training on what to see for concussions. I also, anytime a student does get a concussion, I get all the paperwork. So I have to make sure that all the teachers know what the if a doctor puts any restrictions, what they are. They usually include no computers, very light brain work, things like dim the lights, don't talk loud. It varies depending on how severe the concussion is. But it always amazes me when someone initially gets a concussion or someone just gets a bang to the head and a coach will tell me, oh, well, I didn't think they had a concussion. I go, it's not your job to think whether they have a concussion or not. Your job is to assess. They get hit in the head, you need to assess them. It's that simple.
Yes. Thanks, Dave. That's a really good point. I'm here because last year I sustained a concussion and had to, I was off work for a good 10 months, full-time for 4 months, and then additionally 6 months trying to get back to work on a full-time schedule. So that is why I'm here. I'm a huge, it's funny because my sister-in-law had a concussion, and I really didn't understand it until I went through my own, I have to say.
All right. And for me, I had one on my birthday a few years back. I, oh my gosh, it was just a mess. So I had one on my birthday a few years back, as well as a second mini one, about maybe 3 years ago. So I want to say I had one 6 years ago and then 3 years ago. So two of them.
Okay, and I had mine last, what I want to say last December, but it was really the December before. And then I work with a lot of students. We at the high school level, I've got football players and soccer players, lacrosse players, lots of students coming into my classrooms. Being a computer technology teacher and knowing kind of the impacts, and I'll talk a little bit about more later when we get to suggestions. But you know, just the impact that the technology has with our students coming in after concussions as well. Is really something that I realized a lot after my own personal experience with it as well. So now that we'll kind of segue it into, so, you know, and we mentioned it kind of with sports, it seems those of us who have had them, it wasn't necessarily from sports as well. So let's go ahead and shift into question 2. So concussions are often associated with with impact sports like football, soccer. So, you know, if we didn't already say, how did you get your concussion? Those people on Twitter, how did you get your concussions if you had one, or if you've never had one, what are some other cases of that you've heard? So I'll kind of start this one out by, you know, saying mine was a car accident. I was actually going 25 miles per hour, which really shouldn't result in a concussion according to anybody. But it was actually the airbag that did it. An airbag comes out at least 100 miles per hour when it's coming out, when it's deploying. And, you know, so pretty much nobody at the scene thought that I would have had a concussion, but that's what happened. So that's the combination of being 5'4" and having something 100 plus miles an hour. When that meets, it's not pretty. So that is where I came from. And, you know, at that point, I just learned so much about it. You know, they said that it was a minor one, but in the same breath, my doctor also said that it's also a traumatic brain injury and nothing is minor with the brain. So it's something definitely to keep in mind. So, you know, and I've also worked with students who, you know, had theirs as a result of abuse, which is the very sad factor that we don't really see or talk about. It's not something, you know, abuse isn't something that we necessarily hear a ton about. So there's those hidden ones there too, that are coming from places and reasons that we wouldn't have necessarily heard about before. So does anybody have something to add as far as, Jennifer, you got something? It's popping over to you.
Sure. I was just going to say mine wasn't even as traumatic as that. I literally walked into a door. Like the fact that could have so radically changed my life for 10 months is mind-boggling to me. And I remember going to the doctor immediately after, because like everything started to affect me. And he said to me, oh yeah, you know, you have a mild traumatic brain injury. And I said, okay, well, I'll be able to go back to work by Friday, right? Because I really need to go back to work by Friday. I have a lot going on. And he said, well, we'll see how you do by Friday, you know, go into a dark room, et cetera, et cetera. And then 10 months later, you know, I was back to full time. So, for me, it was not a sports injury. And I know some of the kids that I've since started to meet, some of them have, many of them have been sports injuries, but others have been falls and things like that too.
All right, I'll pop in. Oh, I'm sorry, David, go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Oh, no, go ahead. We all have time.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go to Sarah.
All right. That sounds good. So mine, the first time, like I said, was on my birthday, tripping and falling of all things. Actually, both were tripping and falling. The second one, I want to say I was doing laundry and I tripped and fell and hit my head, and I took off half a day of work and I went in like the second half of the day. And I knew once I got there, it was a bad idea to be there that day. Like it was impossible to just, just everything was just like coming at me. And it was hard to kind of process everything and hard to kind of put a filter on, like filtering your emotions. I experienced that more so in the first one, which was more, it was a bigger concussion than the second one, but I'll get into that later. So I'll pass it over to David.
So most people do associate concussions with like contact sports. I had a girl who had a mild concussion from cheerleading. Her fellow cheerleaders dropped her. And basically, that's what happened. She fell on her head, and initially, everybody just said, "Oh well, it was a light fall. There were mats. They caught most of her. Just her head hit the floor." And turns out that she wound up being out for a week, and then when she came back, she was like on modified academic education for like another 2 weeks. So, it doesn't take a lot concussion to develop. Just be cognizant, and I don't have in front of me any of the resources that I share out to my teachers and coaches, but as soon as I get home, I'll definitely share out on my Twitter, so that people can check out the checklist that you can go through, just so you can check to make sure that if anybody does have a concussion or even a minor one, that people can use to help themselves.
Yes, and I actually just, and I realized we really didn't cover in the beginning exactly what a concussion is. I actually just tweeted out a link to what I consider is probably, saying my favorite isn't really it, but just the TED Talk that talks about concussions, and just did a great job of really explaining what happens to the brain and kind of the role that helmets play in it. And so I tweeted that as a reference out, just as something in case people are kind of wanting to know a little bit more about what specifically happens with the brain when a concussion is happening. It's a great resource as well. And I think my favorite part about that video is it doesn't turn, a lot of times in the conversation, we tend to turn sports into kind of the scapegoat. And we tend to, it kind of creates this conversation of, do we let our children play sports? Do we not let our children play sports? And that's obviously not the conversation that we're having today, but I think it does a great job of kind of explaining what the purpose of a helmet is, which is to prevent skull fracture, more than to prevent concussion as well. So it's a great resource for link that I just tweeted out there, so you guys can see that. I guess I could put that in the chat for you guys too, but it'll be there. So I'll have a few resources that we tweet out. So let's transition into our next question. So how might life change for people post-concussion? So if you have experience with students, kind of how things have been different, what kinds of things to watch for, and then we'll talk, we will address some tips and suggestions a little bit later, but just kind of what are some things to kind of look for of how life might change.
All right, I'll unmute myself. So for me, I want to say that the biggest impact on me was in terms of short-term memory, recall, things of that nature, as well as attention span. I was like probably, oh goodness, I want to say it was my 4th or 5th year of the PhD program, so I was still in classes, and I noticed that like prior to the concussion, to the first one, then I could procrastinate. Like I had the good life, I could procrastinate, just wait till the last minute to do papers and then zip them out like that. But I remember finding myself struggling. I just couldn't get the thoughts together. And I mean, to this day, it still has lingering effects. I'm wondering if that's because I've relied so heavily on coping mechanisms, so that might have like kind of atrophied my ability to be able to do things such as concentrate for long periods of time. But it came back for the most part. Still not exactly where it was, but I would say also the post-concussion syndrome was that was tough. So pretty much for almost a full year, something was just kind of off. Like I had no control, well, little control over my emotions. Usually when you feel something, then you're able to just, kind of push it off to the side or tell yourself, okay, this will pass, just get it together. But um, as soon as an emotion was felt, then it would just come out. Like if it was happiness, sadness, like I was just crying all of the time. And I felt so bad for anyone who happened to be around me that year. But that eventually went away. But it's really hard when you're in the middle of it and you don't know if it's ever going to end. So that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, and I'll jump off of that because that not knowing when it was going to end was probably the worst part for me, because they kept saying like, oh, this is temporary, it was minor, you'll be fine. And I feel bad because as you were explaining it, Sarah, and even you were kind of almost laughing, because it's like we can laugh about it now, right? Because we're fine. And I use fine in quotes because there's still days that are rough. But like I feel bad for almost laughing about it, but it's true, just because like I'd never experienced such this sway of emotions. Like I was putting gas in my car one day, and then I like almost like I tried to like put the gas in before I opened the door to the gas tank, whatever that's called. Oh my goodness, I'm like losing it right now. But like in just the fact that I like hadn't gone through that process that I normally would have, and that was one thing that I was so used to doing. I'm 33 years old. I know how to put gas in my car. I've been doing it for half of my life. And all of a sudden it was like, I felt like I had to like relearn that process. I just burst into tears in the middle of the gas station, and people probably thought I was crazy. And it's just, that sway of emotions you would never you would never think that would happen. I'm like, I'm not pregnant, I promise. And it was, but yeah, for sure. And I've always been really like, I always try to do really well with learning my students' names at the beginning of the semester. And my concussion happened at the beginning of a semester, and I missed the first 3 days. So I'd already missed the first 3 days of the semester. And then it took me a month and a half to get all of my students' names. And I only had 3 classes with the way my school schedule works. And it was actually one day a student looked at me and they said, "You don't know what my name is, do you?" And like, I burst into tears. Like I tried to do it as calmly as I could. But it was, anytime I just felt like I hit the wall when it came to that. And so even this semester, we've had 2 other semesters since then. It's still a little bit longer to learn their names. And it's hard to kind of get that daily reminder of, oh no, is it that one or is it that one? Where I used to be really good at it before. Okay, we'll kick it over to you, Jennifer.
Okay, so very, very similar. Probably about 4 or 5 weeks into concussion, I went to see I went to a concussion specialist clinic, and they gave me this chart, and the chart said physical, cognitive, and emotional symptoms. And I remember looking at this chart and crying because I felt like I had all of them. So I was light sensitive. I was unable to take a shower because the hot water affected me. And then someone later told me, take a cold shower, it would be easier. But I couldn't take a shower and then walk. Like I had to be accompanied to my bed. So I stopped showering. Like, anyway, that's one thing. But then I was such a go person. I was in the middle, like I had helped to organize a conference, for my district, and all of these things were happening. And suddenly I was in bed in a dark room, and the depth of despair that I felt, just feeling like I couldn't do those things again, not knowing when I would do them again. I know EduMatch was my savior in that regard. But physically, my eyesight changed too. I had to go get glasses because one of my eyes became less able to see than the other as a result of the impact. So I really hit my head hard. And short-term memory as well. And for now, like I think like almost all of my symptoms have gone away. But if I'm overly tired, I feel a pressure around my, almost like I'm wearing a helmet again. It doesn't happen super often, but certainly if I overexert myself, it continues to happen for me. So those are, the physical, cognitive, and the emotional symptoms that I know I had, and I'm sure many others do.
Okay, we'll kick it into our next question, which might kind of, our question 4 and 5 might kind of get combined a little bit together. I see question 4 has already been out on Twitter for a little bit, so I think we're lagging behind. Sorry, Sarah. We always do this. We always take longer when I moderate. So the next question is, does your school or workplace have a policy for accommodating students who return following a concussion? If so, what does it include?
So I could speak a little bit to that. In terms of an official policy, that I'm not 100% sure, but I do remember that prior to me experiencing concussion myself, that I had a student who had one. And at the time, I didn't really understand it until I experienced it myself. But it was like night and day for him. So before he had the concussion, and I don't remember exactly how he got it, but before he had it, then this child was just scoring off the charts in terms of all subjects, especially reading, language, arts. But then he had his concussion, and it was a very, very bad one. And when he came back to school, then as he was recovering, then, you could tell that he wasn't processing things the same way as he was before. And by the time that he healed, then time had already passed. It had probably been maybe a year or a year and a half until he kind of sort of started getting back in the swing of things. But as you know, time goes on. So that was a year and a half instructionally that had gone by. So I had that student. I'd known him from second grade on. So his concussion happened around fifth grade. And by the time he was in eighth grade, then he was starting to kind of make some progress in terms of getting back on track. But I mean, there was it's just brutal on our students, when it impacts their academic growth, because the year continues to move on, so yeah.
So we do have a concussion protocol at our district. And I just went back and realized that all of our educational assistants and secretaries are trained on them, and students are supported by guidance counselors, certainly in high school. I'm not sure who would take care of them in the elementary school. I think the concern, but one of the things that I see, and it happened with me as well. So I'm connected so much to my PLN online. And there were days when I would, go on Twitter, even though I knew I shouldn't, but just because I was feeling so low and so sad, and I was missing that connection. My family was, not home, and there was that longing in me to just listen to someone on EduMatch or whatever the case may be. And I think for our students, because so many of their peers are online, that there's a bit of a tension there. So someone will see a student on the phone in a chat and go, oh, well, she's obviously better. Like, she's good enough to do that. Why can't she write my test? So I think that there's that, like a push and pull there that I'm mindful of now as a result, because I know I've had to say to people, you could probably handle, a conversation in really small doses that might help, that, that conversation with her peers might help her emotionally. But it's different than having to write a test. Those are completely different. The concentration levels are completely different. And I remember when I was going back to work, and people would see me and I had my face made up, and they were like, oh, Jen's back, and let's do this with this. And I literally had to put a sign on my door. They advised me to put a sign on my door and say, I'm taking a break, because I looked well. And so I think that's the battle our students are having as well, right? That they look well. They're trying to sort of connect with peers because they're not able to do that on a, significant basis. And then all of a sudden, that's happening as well. So that's my experience.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Jennifer. David, we are talking about the what the policy is when students return to school. So would you like to add kind of what it is you work with your staff on?
So I get to work closely with the office staff when it comes to anything that has to do with physical education, athletics, or anything like that. Whenever we get a student coming back after having sustained a possible concussion. First thing that we ask for when they come back is their doctor's note. And usually the doctors list what restrictions are, when they can come back, and so on and so forth. So we take that all into account. It gets scanned in, put in our system, and I get a copy, and then I get to shoot out an email to all the teachers with what restrictions the student may or may not have. If they have any questions about it, they come and ask me. I check in with the student to make sure that they're okay. And I tell them, if you have anything going on throughout the day where you feel dizzy, lightheaded, sleepy, or any of those other symptoms or signs that they still have a concussion and they need to make sure and check it, then they are free to come and check in with me or any of the counselors, because all the counselors on campus also knows the concussion protocols also. So that's what we do at our school.
Okay, and this is partly I'm on the, oh, we've got a visitor. Hi. I'm in on the, I transitioned from being in the public education side to the private education side. And I know that there are a lot of differences there, but I also know that I worked with students who sustained injuries from concussion when I was in public education also. So kind of one of the things that I wonder that I'm never really seem to be able to find information on is that actually, is every school really, are they supposed to? Is that something that's really required that they should have, or is that really just more of a suggestion at this point? And it's something that some schools are doing and some schools aren't, because I can tell you I've never gotten anything from the office no matter where I've worked when a student has sustained a concussion, whether it's from athletic injury or car accident or whatever. It's been relying, granted, I'm at the high school level, and I think they really rely heavily on the students communicating that information to us. But I feel like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the policy is on that. Is there, do you know if is it just you guys? Oh, I think Sarah's got something. Sarah, what you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in because I'm afraid I might have misspoken a little earlier when I said that I didn't think that there was a policy. I think now that I'm thinking back, then I kind of remember that there was a procedure. We were made aware of it, as a team of teachers, and I believe that there was like a meeting or maybe a couple of different meetings on ways to, make accommodations to help the student, in his recovery. I'm not 100% sure of a standardized procedure, but I do know that that's what we did. We did have conversations around it as a team and as a school. And I do know that there has been training for coaches. I was a basketball coach at the school, so I remember that we all went through a concussion training, like what happens. Yeah, but that's what I remember of any kind of policies or procedures.
Yeah, I know our coaches are really in it, and I feel like a lot of times it really just involves the coaches, and then like the coaches know because they feel like they need to know for practice. But then like, does that trickle down into the teachers part? That's the part that I'm working on, and maybe somebody from my school will listen to this and be like, why is she saying this to the world? Pressure. That's why. Because concussion is pressure on the brain. So let's put some pressure on our people to do better for our students, right? I know, and I'm totally spinning it into question 5, which is what tips and suggestions do we have for teachers with students returning to school following a concussion?
I'm going to chime in.
Okay.
The number one thing I could recommend for teachers is be aware. Like, even if, sorry, daughter, even if you don't think you know what a concussion is, if you even suspect something, go and seek more professional help, right? Or go to someone who you think might have the answers to whether or not a student has a concussion. Because if you just go and depend on someone else to do the work, you're gonna run into that issue of like, there's a car on fire on the highway, and oh well, the next person will call 911. I don't have to worry about it, and winds up no one calling 911. I'd rather it be like 10 of us calling in, and them telling me on dispatch that, hey, yeah, 3 other people have already called, or whatever it is. So I recommend, if you see a student all of a sudden more sleepy than usual, you see a student who's being really sensitive to bright light or noise or whatever it is, it's like that see something, say something.
that's what I can recommend for whether you're a big school or a small school. Everyone should at least have the look fors and leave it to another person to do the nitty gritty investigation part. But if you think you suspect something, say something about it. That's it.
Sorry, I can pop into, I just posted the list of symptoms that I was given. And so I agree with David, like knowing the symptoms is super, super important when you know a student has had a concussion. But also for me, it was, I think just checking in with the student. Hey, how are you doing? Like, what can I do? Is there something I could do to accommodate? Like for me, just people dimming the lights made such a dramatic difference for me, right? So as a teacher, you dim the lights, and most students appreciated it anyway. But it really helped for, it would help for a student to feel like that they're going through something, and that just listening and being mindful of things that might exacerbate some of their symptoms. I think that's the biggest thing, right? We talk about relationships. Well, really fostering that relationship and the communication with your student so that they know that they feel supported.
Yeah, and I'll pop in and just piggyback on that, and second what Jen was saying and what David was saying about really knowing your students and recognizing when something is not how they usually operate, and just asking them about it, asking those questions. Also wanted to second a lot of things I was seeing on Twitter, and thank you to everyone who's participating with this on Twitter. It's like it's fire tonight. Like people are dropping great information on there, but also being being mindful to take things at the student's pace and making whatever accommodations are necessary for the student to help him or her in the healing process.
Yeah, and I also popped in on, let's see, along with one of the questions, there's a resource from the CDC that's recommendations for when students are coming back from school, and it's like a 12-page pamphlet, which is really nice. It talks about what a concussion is, and it even talks about like in school specific roles, as well as on the caretaker side, kind of what things to look out for and some signs and symptoms. So that's a great resource on there as well. So I'll go in and retweet that again after the chat. I will say that a lot of the things that my students typically ask for when they come back is they want the lights turned off. And that's actually something that I believe in learning by natural light as much as possible. So I'm always more than happy with it. At first I thought it was, because you just want to put your head down and take a nap and you're really, but then, it occurred to me that, that's the fluorescent lights, it's just so taxing. And I really, truly understood it after I came back with mine. It was like, and when I talked to my students about it, I just said, it is too much for me to have 26 screens going on and all of this light at the same time. So if it's okay with you guys, we're just going to turn the lights off and we're going to learn with natural light today. And then also on top of that, just the refresh rates on the screens. It's so taxing. It can drain just looking at the screen. I did not take my brain rest as seriously as I should have. I know that now. It probably tripled the amount of recovery time initially to where I got to the point where I was feeling actually good. And really my doctor, and this was even after when my doctor had told me that he was seeing students take twice as long to recover. So kids are taking twice as long to recover from concussions than before we were, there were these big movements of going one-to-one, because there are so many screens and so many devices. And even if it's just a projection, or if it's, because in my school we have TVs, so there's the refresh rate on the TVs. So even if it's just that one device in the room, and then all of a sudden there's 26 devices, there wasn't a direction I could look where it wasn't there. And so that was a bit interesting too. So just kind of being mindful and knowledgeable about it, being aware. And I would ask my students, and there would be times when I would hear from other teachers, well, aren't you kind of making things too easy on them? And doesn't that make a crutch? And I don't know, I always saw students stepping up after that and be willing to do more because they were healing and they were feeling better. And I hate that it's even like, are we cutting them too much slack thing? Because in general, I don't think they're going to cut themselves enough slack when it comes to a concussion, because they don't know enough to understand understand it. I was an adult in that situation, and I didn't do right by myself, especially in the beginning. And so at some point I just said, okay, well, I'm going to be the adult in this situation, and I'm going to do right by my students who walk through the door. And when you know better, you do better. And I think that was really my biggest takeaway as an educator, is just like, I know better, so I'm going to do better, and I'm going to try to educate my students to the best of their ability. And it's if I cut out stuff, they don't need to do it. And I accommodate and go from there, so they're able to have a fuller life. So that is all of our questions for today. Are there any final thoughts to add? I'm so glad that you guys joined. We've got so much information. We've gone for almost 40 minutes already. So if you guys have anything else to add, any final thoughts? Is that it?
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you so much to Jen and to David, as well as everyone who is participating with us on Twitter with the hashtag EduMatch. So great conversation, great resources shared there as well. So definitely check that out. So just to remind everyone, we have our EduMatch learning challenges where you can share what you have learned, so that other people can learn from what you have learned. So if you go to badgelist.com/edumatch, you will see our challenges that we have set up for today. So just look for the challenges that fall under the concussion episode. There is a mild challenge and a medium challenge. So you could post 3 of your tweets for the mild challenge and post a Flipgrid video reflection for the medium challenge, and you'll get a nice shiny badge. So awesome. So tune in. We are going to have 2 episodes this week coming up. So on Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, then we are going to have the phenomenal Jenny McGarrah, who will be on with us for a special episode. So check that out at same bad channel podcast.edumatch.org/tweet talk and interact with us on the YouTube live. And then on Sunday at 6 p.m. regular time, then we will have a tweet and talk about 360-degree video part 2. So we are looking for panelists for that. So if you're into 360 video or virtual reality or anything like that, then you can sign up for that episode, as well as other future episodes of EduMatch, by going to podcasts.edumatch.org/sign up. So definitely hope to see you all there. So everybody take care, have a fantastic week, and hope to see you all soon. So thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for dealing with my baby.
Oh, no, perfect. She's the future.